Hey everyone, Rudros here, and I've got Jared with me to wrap up Opus 15. We are coming at you with the light, dark, and starter cards for this final set review. Jared, how are you, sir?
I'm good. How about you?
Doing well, doing well. Excited to wrap this up. It always feels good to, accomplish something. So let's just get right into it.
Yeah.
We are going to start with our Hero Light card, which I wasn't expecting this. So it's Ace. It's another Ace. And this is another card that I had multiple stages I went through when I read it. The first thing I saw, and I was like, I actually it's not that I misread it, but I guess I misinterpreted it. His first line where it says you can only cast 2 cards per turn. I thought that originally applied to both players. I was like, oh, wow, this is a way to stop combos. And then read the second part, and I was like, forward from the break zone. Oh my God. And then I kept reading. I was like, wait, what? So I had this initial feeling of this card, like, this card bonkers. And then the more I read, I was like, I don't think this card's very good. So unequivocally, being able to cast any forward straight out of your break zone is clearly an incredible effect. However, this card also has 3 downsides to it, including some unique ones. 1, a casting restriction. 2, the fact that when you now just discard your cards for CP, they just get removed. So you can't even stack your break zone for anything. So I mean, he's a neat card in the sense that he's unique, but I think this is one of those cases where they put so many restrictions on him. I think they killed him before he even got out the gate.
I think basically they made Stern and Moshri, and they didn't put any of the restrictions on the card. They're like, yeah, this is really, really powerful. And then they continued making strong light and dark hero cards, and they were like, oh, but we should restrict these ones, right? We saw how that turned out, and we gotta make sure that these ones get reined in. So yeah, basically it's like Yawgmoth's Will. You can cast anything from your break zone. Very historically in all TCGs that this has existed in, this has been an insanely powerful effect, right? It's one of the best. But they just slammed all of the condition text that they possibly could on here. I think it would be bad enough probably if all of your stuff got removed and you could only cast 2 per turn, but then you also have to discard your hands.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's I think any 2 of these restrictions, and then maybe there's some way that we can really make this work. But we had it ruled, it was clarified on Twitter that Ace sees the cards previously cast in the turn. So if you cast a bunch of cards and then cast Ace, you can no longer cast 2 more cards that turn. It's just it stops you. So it's ad hoc, because Rosa does the same thing where you can cast a card and then Rosa, and then it sees the cards previously cast. So Ace is the same in that regard. It doesn't really work with because you have to discard your hand. It doesn't really work with don't play backups, and then this card is kind of doing stuff from the break zone for this game. It just doesn't work like that either. So you have to play backups, so it doesn't work really well with aggro strats, and then you also have to load your break zone. Then when you cast the Ace, if they misdragon you, then the Ace has done nothing. It's just kind of got too much clunky restriction stuff going on. That being said, if this card ever finds a home, I'm sure it's gonna be really, really busted in that home. It's just got so many things, so many fail safes to make sure that it doesn't do anything really, really broken. That I'm gonna have a hard time seeing it over, Stern and Moshri, which is totally unlimited sources of value.
And so. I know we bring those guys up a lot, but again, I would just love to know their design philosophy, because why do they just get unrestricted? Oh, I can do whatever I want. But a card like this is no, you can't do any of it. It's just, I guess I'm just baffled which cards they choose to restrict and which ones are no, that can do whatever it wants. So who knows? Well, let's see what else Light has in store for us. So it's Opus 15. So are we thinking Final Fantasy 15? You bet we are. We've got another Noctis. This is our first Light Noctis. And right off the bat, what I really like about this card is I kind of agree with my buddy Steven. We were talking about light and dark cards, and he was of the mindset that, light and dark, he's I don't like when they make generic good light and dark cards like Stern and Moshri. I like the ones, or Kadaj, I like the ones that are more specialized. I think they should be the more specialized cards that can fit into a certain place, and this Noctis is exactly that. This is a party card. You're not just throwing this into any old deck to fill a light slot. If you're putting this in party, it's Bart Spoko you've mentioned a couple times. And while I haven't even gotten to test him out yet, I don't think I need to, because his text is just so strong that if you're going in on parties, I just don't see how he's nothing but an asset. You've already mentioned Bart's Boko. I certainly want to try Water Lightning, the old like mid-Previa Thancred kind of stuff. I think that could be fun with him. So given what it's meant to do, I can't see a downside in this card.
Yeah, this card is fantastic. Like, if you're ever going to play a Light and Dark card that isn't Stern, like this is, or Stern and Mockery, like this is like the one that you get to they really want, right? This is like when you're partying with your Vikings, you know, and drawing cards off of, you know, drawing cards with Jacked and like playing your Kais for free, or you're like Bart's Boko getting value out of those parties. Like, this is just like doubling up on it, right? And a lot of the times these party decks had problems with like removing things so that they can party, right? And Noctis, he solves all of the problems. Like, there's just so many modes. When you want to draw cards, you can draw cards. When you want to remove a thing, you can remove a thing. If you need dull and freeze, like in decks that never had options to dull and freeze something, you now have dull and freeze. And like, he can haste himself, so he can put in a point of damage, which, you know, you lose a point of damage when you party because two things are attacking when only one thing was attacking before, but he makes up for that. You know, you just get the extra point of damage in because when you haste him, he comes in off of Materia and Bart's Boko. It's just like, this is just like the card that we've needed to like really make me want to play the party decks. Like, they've had a lot going from. Yuna was like a really, really solid bolster for these. You know, Kais looks really good, and like Bart's Boko is, you know, you draw cards and you can generate value in any party. But like, this is the one that really like, you know, stacks on top of it. You can put it in any of the party decks. There's no restrictions about like what element you want to be. You don't have to worry about forcing in a third element so that you can play Furion so that your parties are getting value. It just does everything that you want, you know, no questions asked. And I think it's going to be invaluable for those decks. I'm like, I tried playing, you know, 2 of it with Materia, and I immediately just wanted to go up to 3. I just wanted it every single game as soon as I could. It was so good.
The versatility is especially just incredible, because even if they don't have forwards, like, oh, no big deal, I'll then dull freeze one of your backups and draw a card. So he's never going to be dead. He's never going to be like, oh, I don't have effects to pick from. Like, you're always going to be able to do something. So yeah, really cool card. I hope he's not too strong, but in general, a party attacking, because again, it's weaker because you're losing a point of damage, it needs to be stronger. So I'm hoping this is just one of those cards that says, yeah, this is what it needs to be to make you want to play it.
Yeah.
Now, going to the other end. Noct, why are you asking me that? I love Ardyn as a character. You like him a lot, and I like a lot of the 15 stuff, so I was very excited for this card. And there was a lot of reactions to this card when we first saw it. And so it's unique and it's flavorful. I'll definitely give it that. And I was pretty high on it when I first saw it, but the more I started thinking about it, the more I started thinking about the practicality of playing it, I gotta admit, I'm just not super sold on this card. I kind of mentioned this earlier, but any card that gives your opponent a choice of like what they want to take generally just doesn't work so well, because they will always take whatever is the least damaging option for them. You know, he obviously has this huge downside. You've got to junk your entire hand when he comes in. And with just a keyword difference there alone, if they had given you the option of how many you wanted to discard, I think that alone could have made him really interesting. That, you know what, I'll just pitch 3, make you sack off 4 characters, or sack off, you know, whatever, you take that much damage, because then you could say, oh, I've got 2 dead backups in hand. Yeah, I'll gladly throw those out. But the fact that you're forced to get rid of your entire hand, and then these effects are no joke. You know, the Famfrit, the Neo-X Death effect, make them wipe their board. 20 mil off the top is obviously something they can probably only ever do one time without decking out. You know, damage is one thing. The kind of crummy part is, Kageyama explained this in the article, if they don't have any forwards left or any characters left, they can continue to select that effect even if they don't have anything. Now, at the same time, as Matisky pointed out too, like, well, that also means they now have an empty field. That's like, you know, not anything to sneeze at, but I've also seen decks like Doga that, empty field, no big deal. Boom, 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 boom. Here's a bunch of stuff. So like, I want to like Ardyn. I hope this is a card that I'm really wrong about, but he just seems so particular and not in a good way.
Yeah, I mostly agree with your evaluation of the card. I think, you could change like any part of the text and it would immediately
Mm-hmm.
be like a really strong card, right? Like if you chose the modes, obviously it'd be very busted. You could like eliminate the mill modes so that it wasn't there, but like that would be really busted. You know, it would just be an OTK with like put 8 cards in your hand, play Ardyn, and then make them take a bunch of damage or whatever, right? That would make it really good. If you just took away the opponent selects one character, the control mode, and they had to choose between damage and milling, that would make it really good.
Yep.
If you didn't have to discard your whole hand, that would make it really good. But like, it's just like this particular combination, this exact combination of all of the requirements and all of the modes, that it just doesn't really line up the way you ever want it to. Like, I think everybody kind of went through a stage reading Ardyn when they were like, before you figure out exactly how it works, you're like, this card is busted. Oh, this card's good, and then you're like, oh, this card's bad. Like you can't, because you can't play it on like turn 1 to make your opponent take a bunch of damage. You can't, you know, it just never works the way you want it to work. And I don't think if there's ever really a case where you build a deck around Ardyn, because any deck that gets built around resolving a bunch of Ardyn's abilities, you would just be better off killing them with an infinite loop. There's just no reason not to build towards like, I heard a lot of people talking about like, okay, maybe we like Veil 4 and then return everything to the hand, and then we, you know, Ardyn, make him like discard like 9 cards, make him choose, and just like, you could have just killed them with loop at that point.
Exactly.
Like there's no reason to build a deck around Ardyn. And so I think the only home that I really see for this is, you know, maybe, just like maybe, he's a Nyx target, so like you could maybe play him in caves. That's really about it, and I'm not even sure that he's the best choice there, because that can also play Mashri, and it can also play Nox Suzaku, which we'll get into in a second, but like, that's really the only home that I could possibly see for Ardyn, and it looks kind of grim.
Yeah. One thing I really wish they would stop doing too is a lot of the cards lately, they have done this double auto ability. So it'll say when they enter, do such and, you know, you pay some kind of cost. And then when you do so, which means that now it triggers twice. And we'll see this with Rufus coming up in a moment. And the issue is now if your opponent has Amaterasu, one of the most prevalent summons in the game, they can wait till you discard your entire hand and then cancel him. So you've just like killed yourself for no reason. Whereas if they would do more of the if you do so effects, they have to cancel it before it resolves, which means you'd at least get to keep your hand. So like, I really wish they'd stop doing the double when effects, you know. Same with Sasano from last set. You can wait till they sack the backup. You're like, okay, now I'm going to cancel it. So yeah, I really wish they were a lot more careful about when they did that double win. So
yeah, I do think that was intentional for this card in particular, but like I do feel like, you know, they probably did some internal testing with like some different variations of this card, and when it got to like when the modes were fewer, or when you didn't have to discard exactly that many, or when it was an if you do so, like they felt like the card was too strong in too many situations, and it kind of just like ended up getting lowered and lowered until it is where it is now. But now I just think it's probably too bad to see.
Yep. Well, let's end dark with Nox Suzaku. It's been a while since I played Type 0, but I do not remember this character at all. This one I've kind of had a little trouble evaluating. It's one of those ones that like I can see the potential, and because again you've got this continuous effect, kind of end of turn effect, you can start playing stuff for free, which is really nice, but it's obviously also got a restriction on it, so I don't know. I'm having this is the one, like I had pretty solid opinions on the other 3, but this is the one I was like, I don't really know how to think about this card, so I'm gonna ask what Jared thinks.
Obviously, if you just consider that, like, if you think about it without any condition at all, you know, like whatever, it's really, really strong, right? So now you got to think about like, how do you make this condition work? I think the most clear-cut answer I've seen so far is Cloud Pod, just the 2CP starter cloud from Opus 11. You can just sack the cloud and immediately get this. Like, there's no questions asked. That's probably one of the better ways to go about this card. Now, there's some other ways. You know, there's lots of things that can sack themselves now. Like, if you're playing Kingslaves, you can do the Nyx. He kills one of your Kingslaves immediately, and like Tread and Axis both sack themselves, so it's really easy to play this. So I thought this would be maybe one of the better Light and Darks to try in Kingslave. If you're not playing the one of Ardyn, if that ends up like not working out, or if you're not playing Mashri, like this seems like a really clear-cut way to get a lot of extra value out of your Kingslaves getting sacked off to, you know, whatever it is. There's so many ways to kill. Yeah. Another one is like, you know, Gilgamesh and stuff like that. He obviously kills himself. That's one way to do it. I think it's kind of important to note. I think a lot of people don't understand that this restriction isn't just from hand. You literally like can't play the card. It's like Sephiroth 4. So you can't play it from deck. You can't play it from break zone. It's nothing. It's like it literally can't come out unless something has died. So
I'm glad you mentioned that because I actually thought of like, oh, I'll put this in my Water Golbez deck, just reveal it off the top, play it for, and I was like, oh wait, nope, it says play, so you can't do that unless something's died, of course.
I've heard people say that they want to put it in that deck anyways, and I think they're just crazy. I'm just like, you have to, they want to use the Golbez effect to like sack off all the characters and play this, and I'm like, no, that's like the opposite order that you want to do things in. But yeah, I do think that there are some niche situations. I think the elements that are most likely to be playing this are because of like the Kingslave stuff and because of, you know, Cloud Pod and stuff like that. It's Earth and Lightning probably.
Yeah.
And cards that kill themselves, they work really well with the Legend Regis anyways, so that also wants you to put in the Earth Lightning. I did consider putting this in Monks too, because Ursula is obviously really good at sacking off your own Monks.
Yeah.
Only problem there is that you just don't have a whole lot of targets for the under 4, so you probably got to think about that. That's why I think maybe, you know, King of Slaves is kind of where this card is probably going to see play if it does. But yeah, it's really cool. It's obviously really powerful. 3 cards isn't a lot to reveal a forward of cost 4 or less, but you know, if you play like, you know, 15 backups or whatever it is nowadays, 13 backups, and you play like 31 plus forwards, then you know this isn't going to be bricking very often, assuming you're playing any good ratio of like not less than 5 stuff. So yeah, I think that it looks pretty powerful.
Well, folks, that is every card from Opus 15 as far as the stuff that was that will be released, you know, in the next weeks or so. However, we did get the Avalanche starter set, which I believe was originally supposed to actually come out with Opus 14, but it got delayed, so it's kind of a little 14.5 into 15. Nice thing about these, too, is that I've gotten to play with these, so I can actually give some good feedback of how they are. We won't talk about them individually. We'll talk about them as their 2 pairs. We've got the Avalanche Operatives, we've got the Shrinras, the Turks. So talking about the Avalanche Operatives first, they do feel really good. I like the way they all play together, the fact that they all get 1 cheaper, you know, as long as you see another one in play. And they have really made that Barrett and Tifa from Opus 14 feel really good, whereas beforehand I just never even used those. But like having Cloud come in, bringing back Barrett for free, and then you can also give him haste if you want, give both of them haste, nuke something for 10k. And man, Barrett he really shines in that deck because his ability to basically just swap a card, you swap a card from hand for any of the Avalanche Operatives in your break zone, is really cool. So that's the Legend Barrett. The new Barrett we got too he's actually kind of neat. I saw, I think it was Matisky doing the Cloud Pod with him, and you can Cloud Pod. He sacked the Tifa, the 2-cost Tifa, to bring in the Barrett. You've now gotten rid of an Avalanche Operative, so you can immediately dull the Barrett to break something. So there's a lot of cool little combos. Yeah. All of their party effects are fine. I have to admit, Wedge was a little underwhelming because I misread Wedge. I thought he said break a character of 4 or less. So I was like, that's really strong. And then when I read it, I was like, oh, it's 4 or more. Okay, that's a little harder to hit. And then Biggs, obviously, he lets you draw a card. Jesse lets you play. Overall, I think they're a really fun package. I've enjoyed using them. They're actually not quite as strong as I thought they were when I first read them, but I think that's a good thing. Like, at first I thought, oh my god, these cards are broken. And even the Cloud in particular, if you're having a rough game, sometimes it's actually hard to get, because you have to have an operative out there first before Cloud can enter, otherwise he's not going to do anything. So overall, I actually really like the Avalanche Operatives. I feel like they're a nice, fun, balanced set. They've got some explosiveness and they've got some power, but at least so far, I've never felt like, oh my god, I just can't do anything against these cards.
My experience has been mostly similar. For like where Avalanche sits in the meta overall, it's like in Opus 14, obviously I can't speak for Opus 15, but there was like a big back and forth where it was like, oh, these cards are broken when we were playing with them initially. Once we get a build figured out, like obviously this deck is going to be like tier 1, right? Mm-hmm. And it kind of settled in a little bit under that, whereas like it's good, it's really good against Chocobos, and it's not so good against Doga because you kind of have to attack into their EX bursts as it goes, you know. But it's, I think after the data came in and like everything settled down, is actually just like around and on par with Monks in terms of win percentage at Masters events.
Oh, nice.
So yeah, it really, really strong. There's obviously a lot more to be done in terms of like improving the build. There's a lot of like, it's like basically mono Earth backup lineups where you just play like Tyro, Shantoto, and then a bunch of like Paladin and Kolka and Vigali and stuff like that to search everything out. But I think the heart and soul of the archetype is Tifa, the 2 CP one, because once you like the Tifa is like a 0 CP forward, you just got to play it in off of 2 backups if one of them is fire, or you discard a fire card and play it off of 1 Earth backup, which actually happens a lot. And then the party gets started. You know, like everything starts once Tifa comes in. Cloud is the best way to enable the Cloud is to play the Tifa and then search the Cloud and then immediately do it. So like it kind of resolves itself. Everything revolves around getting that first Tifa down, and then you know the deck kind of starts to function. Jesse and Biggs are the best ways to get continuous value. Biggs is just far and away the best. Drawing a card is great. Eventually Jesse is going to run out of things to do.
Yeah.
And a lot of the time Cloud is going to come down before Jesse can attack, so you don't actually get to play Cloud or the Cloud off of Jesse nearly as much as you would like. That's just kind of the way it works with Cloud being so CP efficient that you would just discard 3 cards to play Cloud a lot of the time.
Yeah.
If you were going to drop one of the Avalanche Operatives, it would definitely be Wedge, because having an Avalanche Operative backup also reduces the cost of Jesse Biggs and Barrett. So it is possible that you would play the Wedge backup, but usually you just want a volume of them. So if you were going to play like a more reserved, slow approach to Avalanche, then maybe like an Earth Fire that just kind of goes light on the fire, plays the Wedge backup might be one way to do it. Also, a small note with the starter Barrett. He's reduced by 2 when you have an Avalanche Operative, and then if you have the backup Jesse, he actually gets reduced to 0 because Jesse doesn't say that it can't become 0. So yeah, you can actually, if you have like Tifa and you have the Jesse backup, which usually it doesn't happen in Avalanche as much as it happens in Cloud Pod. Because that's where you want to play that Jesse anyways. You can actually, play the Barrett for 0 and then sack off the Tifa, get something else, or, whatever it is, and then immediately activate Barrett. So it's actually really, really strong in that deck, I've found. You can also just play the Barrett and then sack the Barrett to Cloud Pod, get Aerith, and then get the Barrett back immediately, just because it costs 0, and then play the Barrett again. So it's actually quite strong.
And then he saw himself die, right? So he can then immediately dull and break something.
Yep. Yeah, it's a very, very solid card for that deck, even though it maybe doesn't. It's maybe not the Barrett that we are thinking about playing when we're playing Avalanche. It's very good for the non-Avalanche stuff, and it's also good for maybe the mono Earth approach if you're not as concerned with playing Fire. I know I had a deck that was just playing mono Earth and didn't play any of the Fire cards, and the Avalanche Operatives being 1 CP 7Ks is just pretty good. You just get to do a lot, and the Legend Cloud from Opus 14 was good in that deck too. So yeah, I think all around these cards are fantastic. I would be surprised if they completely disappeared, but maybe there will be fewer builds that are looking to play with them because everything got new toys. I don't expect it to go anywhere. And obviously Noctis is great for this deck too.
Yeah, they were really fun. I'm excited to try Noctis in them. So moving to, which was also fun, but maybe not as strong, is the Turks. And we'll start with probably the best card in there, which is Seng. It's nice he finally got a card, and he's just that anthem for everything else. His on-entry effect is great. This is usually my search target for President Shrinra, because what's great is that even if the reveal whiffs, and trust me, it's going to whiff, as long as you've got a Turk in hand, you can still play one out for free, which is really good. I think the only thing holding Seng back, and kind of the Turks package as a whole, is just a lack of more names. So the version I ran, because there's only 3 other Turks besides Seng, which is Elena, Reno, and Rude. And unless you're willing to just stock up on multiple copies of those, like I ran a version where I had 3 of the new Rude, 3 new Reno, 3 Elena, and then 1 copy of like the Opus 11 Rude, 1 copy of Reno. So assuming Seng was the only Turk I pulled, I had, I think, 12 possible targets to hit off his, and I've whiffed on this guy constantly because there's just not enough targets for him to hit. So that feels really bad, which is unfortunate. I really wish we'd gotten a new updated Elena. I know she wasn't like in the remake game, but it just feels so weird to have to use that Opus 11 Elena because she's also just not a very good card on her own. President Shrinra is a great backup, especially on an EX burst. You can get Rufus, again, usually Sang is my primary target. If you wanted to do an alternate Turks build, you could play backup Reno or Rude, and now you've got a backup searching a backup. That's always been historically good. And then the Reno and Rude, like, I think Steve D of the YYT said it best, where he was like, it just kind of feels like trying to assemble the pieces of Exodia, or maybe James Greaves said that. I can't remember which of my European friends said that, but when they all come together, you do get this cool effect of like, all the Turks are here, dull their entire board. We're all brave and first strike, and we're all bonkers power levels. So even if we don't kill you, you'll never beat us in combat. You have to do some kind of non-combat thing to get around us. And then obviously there's Rufus, who's supposed to pull the whole thing together. And just, again, he's a victim of that when. They can wait till you pay. Basically, Rufus costs you 10 CP. It's 4 to get him on. Then you got to pay another 6, assuming you're on damage 5. They can Amatrasa you at that point. They can hit your break zone. It's just... However, if you get him off, and I have gotten him off, it does feel really cool. Like the president of Shrinra came down and all the Turks just come out flooding. My one issue with that, though, is that it really bugs me that Rufus himself does not get haste. He comes in, he brings them all out, and then he just has to sit there while the Turks go in. So, like, it's a fun package overall. I do like it. There is kind of this fun, we're just big, stompy beat sticks. What are you going to do about us? Man, I would love to see them get more Turks, which in the game there weren't more members of the Turks that we ever knew. So, like, yeah, it definitely is not as good as Avalanche, and I think it has some hang-ups, but I do still like it as a package.
Well, okay, one correction. There was one more named member of the Turks. We did have Cisne from Crisis Core.
Oh, okay. I never played Crisis Core, so I didn't know that. Yeah.
There are a few others, and then there's also there's Mobius art for just a generic Turk. So it's possible we could get a standard unit job Turks at some point, but probably it's not likely. So yeah. So in terms of Turks as a deck, obviously, like you said, Sang is definitely the best of the bunch. Having this reveal 5 and then play 1, and then if one half whiffs, you still get the other half is great. Like, that's something that I think all of the reveal 5s should probably work like that from now on. Like, whenever it says reveal 5 play, don't make it play directly to the field, make it come to your hand and then play one from... That's just like a straight up improvement to reveal 5, because that mechanic is cursed. So...
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So Sang is definitely the best there, and I didn't think much about the plus 2000 power static at the time, because it's the beat stick is the beat stick, it doesn't really matter. But I found that it's actually really annoying and really good at keeping them around. It kind of gets them out of the damage range, and that's something that's been kind of powerful in the games that I played with and against Turks. That being said, yeah, there's just not enough names to really make it all go around. You got to play 5 Reno and 5 Rude to ever really hit, and even then you're still missing a good chunk of the time, so it doesn't matter. But yeah, as a standalone card, President Shrinra is great. It's an EX backup that searches more backups. Great for Mono Lightning. You might consider playing it outside of that if there's ever a deck that really wanted this kind of backup searching train, but I don't see him replacing, Claris and Earth Lightning, or Duke Goltana and Earth Lightning for that matter.
Yeah.
So I think it's mostly set for Mono Lightning. You might consider playing, President 3 of President Shrinra, and then a couple Reno and 1 Rude or something like that. And that would be a nice little backup train that you could play in that deck that doesn't really require any other moving pieces. Duke Goltana has to play Ramza, but then to really profit off of Ramza, you got to play a lot of backups and some summons and stuff like that. So this one's a little less intensive. You don't have to think about it as much, probably. So I think that kind of makes it a better standalone card. For the Rufus, yeah, I played some games with Turks, never resolved this guy. I played some games against Turks, and I just missed Dragon whenever they paid 6. And it's I don't know. That's I would think I would just rather play the old Rufus probably if I was going to be making a Turks deck again with this. That being said, when I played Turks, I tried the Ice Lightning, I tried Mono Lightning. Mono Lightning felt a little bit better, but if you ignore the Turks, Ice Lightning felt better just because I was playing Zero Miss and Alcid and Roche, and Roche, Alcid, and Zero Miss. Those are good cards. Right. you don't have to play the Turks, but yeah, in terms of Turks, it was kind of underwhelming.
Yeah, I did them in Ice Lightning, and Rufus is the only one who's going to freeze something on entry, and the other ones, they'll dull something, but they're also big anyway that's kind of irrelevant. So agreed. Well, folks, that is every card in Opus 15. How about that? So we're going to just give some kind of overall thoughts on the Opus, some things to think about. First of all, I have to give a shout out to Mysidia Gaming for these awesome thumbnails that you'll see at the start of the video. He always does great work. Alex is a good friend of mine. I put a link to his channel below. You can check it out there, as well as a link to Jared's writing on FFTCG Crystarium. You can see his stuff there. He posted a disgusting monk loop recently, which I wish wasn't in the game, but hey, there you go. That one's actually kind of weird. But so this set overall, I do have some thoughts for it. I have to admit, I'm very disappointed by the 15 stuff, and especially since Final Fantasy 16 isn't out yet, and who knows when it will be. This was their last chance to do the whole, oh, it's the opus of a game. 12 had Ash on the box, 13 had Lightning on the box, 14 had Xenos. We've got Noctis, but how is there no Ignis, Gladiolus, and Prompto cards? They've had one card, and that was an Opus 8, and these are the three main characters next to Noctis. Ardyn has multiple cards. Luna Freya, she was barely in the game. I like her. I love Regis. Regis doesn't even have an in-game character model. He's just in a cutscene. And they've got multiple. How are the boys? I when the set was revealed, I immediately went to Earth. I was like, okay, what are those new cards? They're not in here. So I do think there are some missed opportunities there. Crystals in general. Obviously, I have to play with them to really know, because for the most part, they just seem like counters to me. The only difference being that they're currently independent of a character. So unlike counters, which were always tied to the character that had them, the crystals are independent. So in a way, that's kind of neat, because you can set them up, and then here comes your crystal payoff, and then consume it later. But I'm also just looking at the very little amount of crystal generation we have. And I was even thinking about things like Lady Lilith or Robo Akbel, and I was like, do I even want to try this card? Because to try it, I have to play this one other card that's the only thing that generates crystals. So I have to admit, I'm not very excited about those. And then I'll mention the name clash too. Jared kind of put it in a really interesting light that it's almost like they want us to play a lot of multi-name cards. But weirdly enough, none of them came with any special abilities. I looked it up. There's only 6 special abilities total in this entire set. There's 1 in each element. That's it. So that also feels like maybe a missed opportunity.
When everybody was like, oh yeah, crystals, this is going to be like energy from MTG, right? And then you go look at the energy sets, like Kaladesh or whatever came after. Yeah, it's Kaladesh or something like that, right? And whatever the energy cards, you look at it and the whole set is filled with them, right? So I thought that there was going to be, the whole set is filled with crystal cards. There's 3 generators in each element, and one of them in each element is unplayable, and I was like, this is not kind of what I was envisioning for the crystal. So I can't lie, I'm a little disappointed. That being said, there's some good crystal payoff cards. We just don't have the volume to really make the mechanic shine. I think kind of feels like some of the crystal cards are pack filler, and only some of them are really designed to be used. And I'm just not sure that that's really setting them up to succeed for this set. And I do feel like that's kind of a missed opportunity, and it's kind of start the crystal mechanic off on a sour note. That being said, Lena looks fantastic. Robo, they look fantastic as long as you can resolve them. So that's kind of something to keep in mind with that.
This has kind of come up a few times, at least from a lot of preliminary thoughts on this opus, and I'll kind of touch on the meta and game balance, because I do think there are a lot of new ideas tried in this set. There's a bunch of cards that discard your hand on entry, and then they try to give you another effect to offset that. Discard got a whole new, at least attempt at a look, hey, let's give it this other value. We won't make it as oppressive for your opponent. We'll just make it more rewarding for you as you discard. Yeah. And I don't want it to go unsaid that I do really appreciate that. I appreciate those attempts at just trying something different and balance. However, I know there's a sentiment of feeling this set is underpowered, or, there's no power creep. And I think that's a good thing, but when you don't ban cards, or you have cards like Mashiri, Stern Leonis, Sophie, and it's appropriate to have Jared here because the first time we talked, it was about a ban list. You said it best in one of the cards earlier, that it warps your perception of it, that it's cool you're trying these new ideas, but why am I going to try an Ardyn that might do something sometimes when I've got a Stern that will always just kick your ass? And that's unfortunate, but So that's if there is kind of this feeling of like about the set, I think it's because despite all these interesting ideas, if we don't balance the game out as a whole, no one is going to try these wacky ideas when, well, this thing just works all the time, so I'm going to go for that. Jared, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I would say that Moshri and Stern have kind of warped the format, the entire game. It's really the entire game, because there's no format that exists that well, I mean, I guess you could play title, but nobody plays competitive title. Yeah. But there's no format that exists where you can escape from Moshri and Stern right now. Like it's there in L6, it's there in L3, it's there in standard, and really the entire game has kind of come to center around these cards. There's a lot of, pushback about, like, well, they can't ban Sophie, it's a legend, they can't ban Moshri and Stern, they just came out last set and they're heroes, that kind of thing. I think it's a little, short-sighted. I wish they just ban more cards, like, very frequently. I wish that they, because, I understand that I would be upset if I had just been, getting into the game and I made a deck and it's a deck that needs Stern. Like, I just made Chocobos, I put whatever, $50 into the game, I just made Chocobos, they ban Stern, my $50 is completely wasted or whatever, right? I understand that perspective, but like, I do think that, I can look at this entire set, and while I, as a player who has a complete collection, I have 3 of every card in the game, I can make whatever deck that I want, I can look at this and say, okay, maybe I can make a deck that can compete with these. But, as a normal player, and I have, like 1 deck or 2 decks maybe, and I'm looking at the set, I'm like, I don't have to buy anything this set unless it goes into like exactly one of my decks, and with the crystal mechanic in particular, it's so underwhelming that I don't think many people are like casual to soft competitive players are going to be excited to get anything out of the set, and I think that's really, really worrying.
Yeah, I normally make a lot of deck techs for the Opuses. I'll probably still make some, but I think of things like, okay, I think the Rebels look interesting. I want to see how the Rebels work as a package. I would like to try the Headhunters as a package. I want to try the Dancers. I want to try the Kingsglaives. I've always been attracted to to tribal stuff in Final Fantasy. That's what the games are all about. What job do you like? Get your favorite job and go out there. But these decks I can almost promise you, they're all going to be very fair. They're like, this is a fun deck you would take to play against another fair deck, and if I take it and then get my face kicked in by super competitive stuff, it makes me like, well, okay, so why do I even want to build that? Like, why do I want to try if I'm just going to get destroyed? So that's the part that concerns me, because, again, especially compared to last Opus, I remember last Opus, I felt like every element had like 7 cards that were, it's this monster for every element, it's this summon for every element, it's this card for every element. And I do feel there's less of that here. But yeah, these cards that do look interesting and I do want to try, part of me is like, well, I mean, again, I'm trying to play a fair deck in a unfair world.
Yeah, I think you really hit the nail on the head right there, because there are so many cool things to do with these cards. Mm-hmm. If you just like ignore kind of the other stuff that's happening, like if you could escape from standard and get into a world where, Moshri, Stern, and Sophie, those 3 cards, if they just didn't exist, I would be so excited to play with this set. I would be, okay, I want to try crystals, I want to do Leviathan, bouncing my own stuff, I want to play Sky Pirates, it's going to be amazing. But I think, when those cards exist, and, when Bismarck and Typhon are, next in line on the chopping block there, like, you get rid of those broken cards, like, then everybody's going to play the win package, Yep. When this kind of stuff keeps happening, like, it's very hard to get excited to play Dancers. These right. These kinds of decks that they look really interesting, they have these insane payoffs and these kind of wonky restrictions on them, and those kinds of decks, while before Opus 12, maybe 13, 12, 11, that kind of era, you could play these decks, and there was, you weren't going to die on like turn 4 or whatever it is, right? You weren't going to get 100% outvalued by another deck no matter what you did. Now they're like, you just can't, it's just not possible anymore. And I think innovation, creativity, and just the volume of viable decks has decreased so dramatically over the past maybe 2 sets. that it's really hard to get excited about these underpowered cards without something changing to shake up everything that was king before.
Yep, I think you nailed that. Well, do something a little fun here. We're going to do a top 3 cards of the set, and we can kind of define that however we want, whether we think these will be the most powerful or just the most interesting or ideas we're trying.
Yeah.
And I still need to come up with my 3, so Jared, I'm going to let you go first. What are your top 3 cards for Opus 15?
Unfortunately, I'm going to have to give the number 1 slot to probably the card that nobody wants to hear, and that's Rydia. Rydia is just super powerful. It's going to go in existing decks. It's going to go in Doga. It's going to go in Monks and stuff like that. But I think it's also going to open up a lot of opportunities to do things that we could never even think about doing before. You can make crazy decks with Rydia, and maybe they'll be able to compete with Doga. Maybe they won't. But, I think that the idea of playing Rydia and a bunch of rainbow summons is going to be something that probably outlives Doga. And I think we're looking at a card that's kind of going to change the course of FF history right here.
Oh,
and I see a lot of reason to be excited about this card. Not just for Opus 15, but 5 Opuses from now, 10 Opuses from now. I think that this card is powerful enough that we'll continue seeing it for a very, very long time. I guess if that was number 1, I'll go with number 2 next. I think Lena is really good. This is like the hope of crystals, right? If crystals are ever going to be good, this is like the most value they can possibly get out of them. I think it's going to go in like every crystal deck that we can possibly see in the foreseeable future. It's just like far and away the best conversion rate of crystals into CP value. And I see a lot of reason to try crystal decks just for this card alone. Right now you kind of have to play at least 2 elements to really get a whole lot of crystals and get enough that you actually want to do Lena. But there's a lot of room to explore with this card. You can do the Bart's thing. You can do Earth, Water, and then play Robel as your other crystal consumer. You can use Realm and Gao and do all of those combos that kind of like get a lot of value out of Lena, and then you get to reuse her afterwards too. So yeah, I'm really excited to build with this card. I've made several decks with the card already, and it's just been great every time I play it. I think this is one of the ways that maybe nice defensive decks can get a playoff for playing their backups. You can finally make a board for cheaper than Doga at a certain point in the game,
Yeah.
And I think this is, something that could considerably shake up the meta, and maybe the only way that you could play crystals right now.
That's fair enough. I'm going to interject with some of mine, give you a little break there.
Sure. Yeah.
So one of them that legit you have sold me on just talking throughout these entire reviews, and that is Noctis. And in particular, you've mentioned Bart's Boko a lot, and I haven't even thought of Bart's Boko since Opus 12. That was a deck that I felt kind of like exploded at the start of Opus 12 and then just fell off because I guess Samurais killed it maybe, whatever the reason was. And so you've really gotten me thinking about like Bart's Boko. I'm like, oh yeah, and you can do this Noctis. Then you can do this Ultros. And then you can do this Luna Freya. So regardless of how good it is, again, for the first time in a while, I got excited about like I do want to try that. So Noctis is definitely going to be my probably number 1. I'll say number 1 for him just because I'm excited to try that party theme, because Opus 12 did such a good job of finally making us want to use party attacks with the Sid Mid-Previa, with the Yuna. Even had the Shikaris. So yeah, I'm excited to try that again. So I'll say Noctis. So number 2 is kind of a cheat because it's not just one card, but it's a package, and it's the Kingsglaive package. Despite the fact that I don't think it's going to do very well, I've been rocking the 15 deck since it came out. Opus 11, I was all on the Earth Lightning 15 cards. And I don't know, I do want to try this mono lightning build of, I've got a Lulu backup, I've got a Vayne that comes down, makes them all bigger. I've got, who is the other? Oh, Fel Thanos. So maybe I can actually stand up tall this aggro, just drop the Fel Thanos. I still don't think it's going to be, I think it's going to be what I expect it to be, which is a little underwhelming, but they've put so many cards out in just this set. I just feel like it'd be like, if you're not playing Kingsglaive, I feel like you pretty much have to ignore Lightning in this set. So, all right. What's your third one?
I think I want to give it to Heights and Philo. Like if I am allowed to do that, I think, between the 2 cards, obviously it's the Sky Pirate stuff, Kites is really, it's kind of giving me hope that, maybe Sky Pirates can actually survive the aggro, and it's just now fast enough that you can get there with Van, because Kites really, has an insane CP conversion rate when you blink Ven. Like you just get so much CP and you get to do so much stuff with that it speeds you up by like a whole turn basically.
Yeah.
And that's really, really strong. And then, Philo on the other half, not only was it the Sky Pirate backup that we've needed, it's also unlocked so many possibilities for Win playing water cards. And that was, something that really, really kind of gated a lot of different decks from being, just tier 1, was not having like a Win backup that can tap for water. You had to play Tyro, you had to play Shantoto. And now that you have this, it's, maybe not totally ideal in that you can't search it with Nordstalin or whatever, but just having this is gonna change a lot of the ways that Wind decks go about deck building. And I'm really excited to see how that shapes up.
That's awesome. So I thought of my third spot was between two cards, and oddly enough, they're both Category 6 characters. One was Go-Go in Ice, and the other one is Cyan in Samurais. And I think I'm ultimately going to give it to Cyan. I'll give an honorable mention to Go-Go. My only issue with Go-Go is that he doesn't really feel like an Ice card. Because he's got such a unique effect. Like, he doesn't feel Ice. He's just... And I have a feeling I might hate that card when I see people just copying absurd abilities, but... I hope Cyan can help bring Samurais back because I really liked that tribal. I know some people found Tenzin frustrating to play against, but to me, Tenzin was a card that, like, yes, that's what it should be. It's strong, but it was restricted. You have to play that card in Samurais. You can't just jam him into any deck ever, in any fire deck, fire, earth, whatever. He's got to be supported with Samurais, and if you do, he gave you a good payoff for that. Well, then things like Typhon came along, and he just craps all over that card, because, like, whatever.
Yeah.
Even if you get to draw Samurai on the way out, it's just too expensive, or they're just going to blow it away constantly. So I'm hoping this Cyan will give us that early pressure you talked about, because back in Opus 12, I had enough time to build up a board to do the big cleave swings. I can't do that anymore. I'm dead on turn 2, so I'm really hoping Cyan will help bring Samurais back into the light. Awesome. Well, folks, I think that is going to do it for our Opus 15 review. Jared, is there anyone you want to give a shout out to? Or
shout out to my whole team, Team Platters, FFTCG Crystarium. We write articles about all sorts of stuff. We have an open letter to Square Enix and Hobby Japan right now about the state of the game. And I've covered stuff recently about monks and the Regis loop and like what else did I do? Oh yeah, like how many backups you should be playing in Amashri and Stern World. Yeah, that was an article that I had been meaning to write for a long time, and it kind of finally came into shape with the state of the game in this opus. So check those out if you want. And thanks for having me on.
Oh, it's a pleasure, sir. If you have been playing the game for any length of time, I highly recommend you read that article. I'd been thinking about that myself. I was like, man, I should do a video on that. And then your article came out. I was like, oh, good. He put it to words, before because, and that I'll end on that note is that I'm a mid-range player, but I appreciate all archetypes. I want everything to exist. I want control to exist, aggro to exist, because I like the kind of rock, paper, scissors balance it all has. But lately, it's just not fun to play the game because you're dead in 2 turns. Like, what is the point of these backups? And that's why I was glad you focused on backups so much. Like, what is the point of playing these backup cards? I'm dead before they do anything. So, really good article. I'd highly recommend you check it out. Thanks so much. I couldn't imagine doing these by myself, so I'm glad I had you here with me. And folks,
it's a pleasure.
If you have any comments, questions, leave them below. Let me know what your favorite card is from Opus 15. What are you looking forward to the most? And I hope you have a wonderful and lovely Opus. We'll see you next time. Take care.